Greetings, and welcome to the 2020 San Diego Climate Summit. We are so glad you're here. This year has been truly one for the record book. Amidst significant trials and challenges, we have been reminded of the vital importance of adaptation and the work we do at the forefront of building community resilience. Today, I am most honored to introduce a leader in our community whose life work and research encompasses this very intersection. With her plenary address entitled The Recipe for Resilience, Climate, Community, and Culture, the Climate Science Alliance welcomes Dr. Isabel Rivera-Collazo. Dr. Rivera-Collazo is an assistant professor of biological, ecological, and human adaptations to climate change in the Department of Anthropology at the University of California, San Diego, and Scripps Institution of Oceanography. She is an environmental archaeologist with regional interest in Puerto Rico, the Caribbean Basin, and the Pan-Caribbean region, and her research focuses on the effects that human activity has over island ecosystems through time, as well as how people have responded to climatic and environmental change in the past. Dr. Rivera-Collazo's work focuses on resilience and adaptation, investigating what decisions enhance or reduce adaptive success. Taking an applied approach, she also works with local communities in the quest for understanding the current and expected impacts of climate change, including threats to coastal heritage. In collaboration with Dr. Rivera-Collazo, Para la Naturaleza, and other community partners, and with support from the Wildlife Conservation Society's Climate Adaptation Fund, the Climate Science Alliance was excited to convene Descendants United for Nature, Adaptation and Sustainability, known in short as DUNIS. This project's primary objective is to work with local community members to restore coastal sand dunes in northern Puerto Rico that were severely degraded by Hurricanes Maria and Irma. Although sand dunes are vulnerable to damages, they are critical for protecting ecological environments, cultural heritage, and most importantly, human communities. We are excited to continue this good work alongside Dr. Rivera-Collazo on the DUNIS project, representing an integrated and applied approach to community climate resilience.
Hello. Many thanks to the organizers of the Climate Summit for inviting me to share our work with all of you. As we increasingly advance in the climate crisis, the word resilience becomes more present, more urgent, or even increasingly hated. In archaeology and within the multiple communities of heritage specialists, we often hear the assertion that cultural heritage can contribute to climate mitigation and adaptation, that it can inspire climate action, that it can raise climate ambition. Before we started our project DUNAS, I realized that while many people repeat these inspiring statements, which resonate with us as heritage practitioners, in practice, heritage and culture are rarely part of climate mitigation and adaptation plans. Programs that inspire climate action often do not include cultural heritage. It is not easy to build links between climate ambition, thinking specifically of the goals of the Paris Agreement, and tangible material culture, in particular, archaeological contexts. This is particularly significant because the goals of climate mitigation is social resilience. But how can we talk about societies if we do not consider culture? As an environmental archaeologist working with climate change and social vulnerability, my studies have focused since the beginning of my career on understanding my island and my people. For me, my main objective has always been to produce actionable science that not just descriptions of the past. In this context, resilience inspires the continuation of our ways of living, but requires the possibility of learning from the past to find new ways of moving forward. Let me share with you our experience in Puerto Rico. Climate scientists in Puerto Rico are deeply aware of the challenges that we are already facing: warming sea surface, sea level rise, increased storm frequency and intensity, ocean acidification threatening our coastal ecosystems and our built heritage on the coastal zones, impacts of severe storm surge, flooding and impacts of severe precipitation. These drivers are affecting our communities now, not in the future. And the severity of these impacts becomes even more serious when we consider the ability of Puerto Ricans, my Boricua siblings, to respond or recover after a catastrophe. The poverty rate in Puerto Rico in 2018, not even considering the now post-COVID impacts, was 43%, which is more than double the rate of Mississippi, which is the poorest state in the United States. Therefore, the people that are affected by these impacts that I'm listing here have very limited resources to absorb further impacts or to recover after damage. Furthermore, we are not a state. We are a colony or an unincorporated territory of the United States, which limits even further our ability to decide what type of actions we can make as a nation. Focusing on the coastal portion of the island, 67% of the population, that is about 2.4 million people, live on Puerto Rico's coastal zone. These areas are also highly important for our economy, bringing a total of $20.2 billion in annual wages in 2018 alone. We stand much to lose when facing climate change and the current and expected climate impacts. Hurricanes Maria and Irma in 2017 were an example and a traumatic lesson of our vulnerability to climate change. Now, the mitigation of climate impacts often assumes a vertical imposition of disaster plans. Legal system within federal or state agencies recruit specialized personnel who investigate, plan, and bring solutions to the communities. This linear perspective often excludes the strategic participation of stakeholders, in particular, local and indigenous groups. These hierarchical and exclusive approaches to disaster mitigation impose colonial discourses of meanings of space, of relationships with land, of definition of heritage, which alienate communities and civil stakeholders from their power over the materiality of their present and their past. In contrast to perspectives of heritage as something inert or dated, cultural heritage has the power to help people ground their identity and recover after a disaster. But tapping into that potential requires building horizontal governance structures, which in turn asks us to break with many stances that we have learned within hierarchical institutions. Even though, in theory, the idea of acknowledging the power of communities to decide their path forward sounds as an inspiring goal and as an inspirational goal, making it happen can be scary because it places practitioners in often unpredictable situations that need to be negotiated. It can shake the basis of the discourses that are unconsciously repeated. It leads to redefining whose decision is valuable and can challenge our ability to create something new when we are recognizing, acknowledging that practitioners are not the only voice that should be heard. Today, I will share with you our experience linking cultural heritage, ecosystem restoration, and disaster mitigation to inspire climate action, using as an example the project that we developed after 2017 hurricane season in Puerto Rico specifically. In September 2017, Hurricane Maria caused damages that we did not expect to see possibly until past 2100, near the end of the century, and then only under the most extreme forecasts of sea level rise. For example, these images show the current risk zones here with the sea level as it is now, and the predicted sea level the predicted impacts with about 3-meter sea level increase. These images show the extent of the damage caused by Hurricane Maria. Areas that were not expected to be flooded saw massive water accumulation, over 3 meters of water on the coastal plain. The water pressure caused damage to the coastal ecosystems, and in particular, the coastal sand dunes and freshwater wetlands as the storm surge, so the coastal sand dunes were breached and the storm surge could penetrate inland and inject salt water into freshwater environments, thus damaging and burning sensitive flora. These impacts were significant to me personally because I have been working in this section of the north central coast of Puerto Rico since the 1990s. This is where I did my first field school as an undergrad. This was where I did my first paid job in archaeology. This is where I did my PhD. Then since 2012, I have been learning and implementing citizen sciences on this coastline and learning from these communities and working with them hand on hand. I have learned so much from them, and they were deeply suffering after Maria and Irma. But these hurricanes are just single short-lived events in the process towards changed climate. The problem is that they happen in the context of sea level rise. Let me share with you how does climate change looks on the ground. This is the central focus of my study area. In this photo to the left shows my students of the Tierras Nuevas Field School having lunch next to one of the mounds right here of the Playa Machuca or Tierras Nuevas archaeological site in 2015. The photo to the right, this one here, shows the coastal sand dune ecosystem just to the west of Playa Machuca. At that time, in January 2017, covered on coastal forest ecosystem just before the hurricanes. The lower two images show the same locations a few years later. As you can see in this image here in February 2018, just a few months after Hurricane Maria, you can see the damage to the sand dune ecosystem. As you can see, the frequency of the storms and high intensity waves under higher sea level, not just hurricanes, is washing away the coastal portion of Playa Machuca, as you can see here, exposing the cultural layers as well as the red Pleistocene soils that are exposed in this profile. This coastal erosion is not just limited to this archaeological site. I walked many kilometers to the east and west of Playa Machuca, and the results were all the same. Erosion has been damaging a significant amount of coastlines, coastal ecosystem, and cultural heritage sites. And the erosion has not stopped after Hurricane Maria. This scenario led to the creation of the project Dunas in collaboration with the Climate Science Alliance and with economic support of the Wildlife Conservation Society. This is the logic of our project. People cannot live on top of the sand dunes because deforestation, removing the vegetation of the top part of the sand dune will trigger further erosion because the wind will be able to gather the sand and transport it away. So people live behind the sand dunes using the local ecosystems, wetlands, rivers, sand, sandy beaches, etc., for subsistence resource exploitation, for getting their food. As sea level rises and things change through time, and the sand dune is able to migrate back, often covering ancient sites, transforming these ancient communities into archaeological sites. In the present, sea level is rising, and it will not stop rising in the lifetime of the existing coastal sand dunes, which have so far acted as a natural buffer, as a natural barrier, protecting the human communities that live just behind them, and as the human communities and the ecological communities. But the present coastal geomorphology is already eroded. So these changes are exposing the ancient archaeological sites that both evidence how fast climate is changing and how much we stand to lose if we don't do anything. Dunas, which means Descendants United for Nature Adaptation and Sustainability, has brought together the local community members, environmental activists, the NGO Para la Naturaleza, local scientists, and university students to do something about this. With the expertise of Vida Marina, a local organization specialized on sand dune restoration, we created a biomimicry system, which you can see here, that uses wooden planks to build a system that mimics natural sand trapping by plants, therefore creating a system that helps recover the breached sand dune that I showed in the earlier photos. Under the leadership of Para la Naturaleza and local volunteers with expertise on coastal biodiversity, We are also recovering native plants in the immediacy of the coastal wetlands and the sand dune forest to help recover and restore the freshwater wetlands just behind the sand dune that were damaged by the saltwater flooding, thus helping these systems recover faster than under natural processes and helping also protect endangered and sensitive species. While the sand dune and the wetland ecosystems recover, we have been investigating the local archaeological sites to learn how our ancestors dealt with climate change, storms, and coastal erosion in the past. How did they use these ecosystems? What can we learn from the past that can enhance our modern knowledge systems? We also talk about climate change, about climate impact, social vulnerability on site, looking at the communities still impacted, inviting our research partners to contribute their emotions, their experience, their ideas, their observations, and more importantly, their solutions, advice, and mitigation options. We also share capacitation workshops with our participants, sharing with them the tools to pass this knowledge forward, to take action in response to climate threats impacting their own communities. These activities will not stop climate change. They might buy us 5 or 10 years. We have to come to terms with the fact that we will not be able to save all heritage and all coastal ecosystems. Things will never be just as they were before, especially if we are not changing our behavior, if we are not increasing and raising our ambition to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement and other goals to mitigate our impact over the climate systems and environmental systems. That is why we need to increase ambition to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. If we want to have any type of similarity with how things were, we have to do more. Dunas conveys that message and helps our partners to have these conversations while doing something about things. By protecting the sand dune systems, we have a little longer to make the hard decisions, but we have to take them soon. We do not have until 2050 or 2100. These are real scary challenges that we are facing now. Thank you very much for your attention. I want to acknowledge all the people that have brought this idea to life and without whom this would have been just a crazy idea. And in particular, the Climate Science Alliance, Dr. Amber Paris and Alex Warnecke, and the Climate Adaptation Fund, which grants, the Climate Adaptation Fund, which was awarded to us from the Wildlife Conservation Society. And all the participants, our people from Boriquén, the Para la Naturaleza, and all the volunteers that are currently still actively going to the field and help us even through COVID to maintain this project and to continue action. Thank you very much for your attention.